So let's take a look. Can you really change who you are? Okay. I've been doing a lot of introspection this year, and Dr. K really helped kickstart that for me. And I feel like I'm finally waking up to who I have been. I feel like I've been dishonest with everyone in my life because I've always played whatever character I think best fits the situation instead of being my authentic self. Even with respect to my own self-image, I thought of myself as a really good person, yet I've treated women with no respect and ruined all the relationships I've been in by never telling them how I really feel about things. I guess what I want to know is if I do keep working hard to better myself in these fundamental ways, how do I get over the disgust I feel towards myself? I feel like I want to move to a new town by myself and just stay by myself like a time chamber until I feel ready to come out. Maybe time is all that's needed. I'm just feeling really down tonight. I love you guys. Thank you. So this, unfortunately, is a really common problem, right? So sometimes we're on a journey of self-growth. And as we start to introspect, as we start to dig into who we are, as we start to think critically about ourselves, what we find is something that's not very pleasant, right? We start to realize, okay, now that I'm really looking at myself for like the first time, I'm realizing like, holy crap, I've been quite dishonest. And even though like in some ways, like I think of myself as a good person, what I realize is that I haven't been very authentic. I've treated people with disrespect. I've messed up relationships. And sometimes we also feel like disgusted by ourselves, right? We're like, holy crap, I had no idea that it's actually like, this is bad, right? Like how do I overcome that? How do I like overcome the disgust? And then I can understand this as well, because sometimes what we want to do is like, we want to go into a cocoon, right? We want to disappear. We want to move across country. And like, we realize that we're so screwed up that we need to like go somewhere to a different location, enter this hibernation chamber of self-work and come out on the other side like a new human being. This is something I understand all too well because it's exactly why I went to India. I was like, man, I suck at life. I need to like go and transform myself into a good human being. And I even went like halfway across the world and like went to a new place and studied with monks in my journey. That was my time chamber. So it's something I really understand. So this is something that happens a lot, right? As we start to walk the journey of self-growth, we discover things that are kind of sus. And as we discover those things, we really want to fix them and we can feel like, disgusted with ourselves. So what do we do about this? Okay. So can you really change who you are? It's a great question. So that's where I'm going to start with, a couple of simple points. So when we say like, can you change who you are? The first question is like, who are you, right? How do you determine like who you are? So sure, we talked a little bit about the true self and stuff like that, but we'll take a step back from that for a second. So like, if you're disgusted with yourself and you like want to be a good person, right? Because you sometimes used to think of yourself as a good person, then you discovered all this crap that you're doing, which you never realized. Does that make you a bad person? So I think the first question to ask yourself is like, what makes a good person and what makes a bad person? Right? So like, just think about that, because if your goal is to be a good person and we want to change who I am, right? That's the goal. Let's start by defining like what makes a good person. It's kind of interesting. So this is why a lot of people struggle to become good people, because if you start to ask like what makes a good person, like, I don't know, right? So some people may say, okay, like what makes a good person is like doing good things. So that's kind of interesting, right? So it's like, so if I do good things, does that make me a good person? Not really, right? Because we sort of say that good people can do bad things and bad people can do good things. So we still sort of have this idea of a good person and a bad person. So if we kind of look at it a little bit more, we can say, well, on balance, if I, help more than I hurt, then I'm a good person, which I still don't know if I entirely agree with that. It sort of makes sense. So let's say I'm a surgeon and I've, saved 99 people's lives, and I'm drunk driving one day and there's a tragic accident, and, the people, I run into another car and someone passes away. Am I a good person then? Like, because I've saved 99 people's lives and maybe I've taken 2 or 3, and does that make me a good person or a bad person? So the first thing to kind of like, so as you kind of dig into this, you may come up with your own answers. Sort of, I lean heavily on, once again, Eastern perspectives, which I'm about to share. So this is the way that I see it, okay? This is the model that I use. So the first is that, as we sort of talked about already, like there's a true self and there's a false self, and that people are neither good nor bad. You just are, right? There's like, you just are. That fundamentally human beings all have intrinsic value. It's not like based on your actions or anything like that. Like all human beings have some sense of value. In the Eastern perspective, there's also this idea of the true self, right? Which is neti neti, which is like not anything that can be described. Who you truly are is not good or bad, is not smart or dumb, is not rich or poor, is not professionally successful or professionally unsuccessful, is not level 60 in Lost Ark, not level 20 in Lost Ark, like whatever. So we can fill it up with ego, and ego can assign us to be good or bad, but at the core of the day, like the humanness within you is sort of like fixed and neutral and generally speaking positive, okay? So then the question becomes, well, what about actions, right? So can you really change who you are, and what about actions? And this is where I like the theory of karma. So the theory of karma sort of says that, you know, you can take actions and actions have consequences, and we as human beings tend to assign value to actions. So there's another really interesting thing about the theory of karma is that a lot of people think that like, so we're going to talk about karma for a second. So a lot of people think that like good karmas cancel out bad karmas, right? So I'm going to tell you all a quick joke. So 3 mathematicians go to an archery range. And so the first one shoots an arrow, right? And it goes 10 feet to the left of the target. He's like, damn it. And the second one shoots an arrow and goes 10 feet to the right of the target. And the third one jumps up and says, we hit it, right? That's what we think of. We think of like life as a balance. But the truth is that like averaging stuff isn't actually how life works. So in the case of the surgeon, so you can do 99 good deeds and it doesn't allow you to like get away with one bad deed, right? Each thing has its own consequence. The other way to think about it is that, you know, if I throw a ball up in the air, like that ball is going to come down. If I throw a ball down towards the floor and it bounces off the floor, it's going to come up. It's not like throwing one ball up in the air and throwing the other ball down at the air at the same time, that both balls stay the same, right? Each action that we take has its own consequences. And so you can make a determination and you can decide for yourself and you can say, okay, what's the ratio of like good actions to bad actions that makes you a good person? I actually don't think that that exists. I think it's apples and oranges, that you can't be a good person, right? The only things that you can do good deeds and you can do bad deeds, but you as a person are like relatively fixed. Now, we can absolutely, from a practical societal perspective, say that, you know, like this is a bad person. But this is something that like I've come to understand a lot, you know, working in addiction psychiatry, is that oftentimes when someone is addicted to a substance, they feel like bad people and they're told by their family members that they're bad people, and sort of because they've done a lot of bad crap, right? Like they've like hit people while drunk driving. They've like, you know, ruined marriages. They've been toxic to their children. And so they naturally feel really bad about themselves. And are those bad actions? Absolutely. Should you take responsibility and accountability for your actions? Absolutely. And helping that person get better, helping that person start to be in a place where they can make the world a better place, starts by some amount of like fundamental understanding that you are neither a good person or a bad person. Have you done bad things? Absolutely. Should you pay for those? Absolutely. And that doesn't doom you to being a bad person, right? Ultimately, if you're saying that bad actions make you a bad person, then by definition, you should be able to do good actions to make you a good person. I don't really buy into that, right? Because I'm saying that who you are and what you do are independent. Practically, we make some judgments in the real world, right? Which is okay. But at the core of the thing, if you're asking, can you really change? Like, in a sense, I don't think so. What you can change is your actions. But as a human being, you can't change. Now, the caveat there is that I probably don't agree with any kind of negative judgment that you have about yourself, right? Because you are just what you are. You are neither good nor bad, but you can absolutely change your actions. So the next thing that I kind of want to point out, actually one more point here, which is that once we make an identity determination about ourselves, that influences what we believe we're capable of, right? So if I view myself as a loser, I won't actually act in a way that improves my life. So like if I'm a loser, I'm not going to apply for a promotion because I'm a loser. If I'm attracted to someone, I'm not going to ask them out because I'm a loser. So what happens is this sense of identity about I'm a bad person starts to shape our life and become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's why like I really like the yogic perspective, because it seems like it's helped a ton of people. Because like you are neither good nor bad, you are just you. It's your actions that can be good or bad. And so if you want to transform your life, don't worry about transforming your identity. Just transform your actions, right? Because that's like ultimately what's important. Like you can be a bad person, even if you believe you're a bad person. If you're a surgeon who saves 99 lives and then you have a drunk driving accident and then you spend some time in jail or whatever is the appropriate accountability, then you get out of jail and you dedicate your life to saving 1,000 more people, I think that's fantastic. Is it unfortunate that you had that negative karma? Absolutely. Should you take responsibility for it? Absolutely. And that one event does not determine anything about the rest of your life, right? You can choose to act in a positive way after that point. So now, this person has more than just this question, right? So can you really change? I think in a sense, no, because you are what you are. But if you think what you are is bad, then I disagree. It's kind of weird answer, okay? But there's a subtle point here. So I guess what I want to know is if I keep working hard on myself in these fundamental ways, how do I get over the disgust I feel towards myself? This is tricky. Very, very tricky. So you can't get over the disgust you feel towards yourself. Kind of a weird thing to say, right? So I want y'all to think about this for a second. Really pay attention. The desire, where does the desire to get over the disgust you have within yourself come from? Do y'all understand that question? Right? So, I want to get over my self-disgust. Right? What is the energy that is driving this goal? It is disgust. Right? I'm disgusted with myself. That's why I need to get over it. The desire to get over your own disgust is coming from disgust. Y'all see that? It's crazy. It's like this part of me is revolting, so I need to get rid of it. Which the part of you that thinks that that's revolting is in and of itself revolted by it. So you can't get over it. In fact, this is why people get stuck, right? Because anyone who wants to change that, like, listen to his language. How do I change who I am? Do you guys get that this question can only be asked if you have a fundamental disgust for yourself? Why do you need to change? Well, because I'm a sticky, ugly person on the inside. So even as you try to improve, what you're actually doing is reinforcing that disgust. Do y'all get that? Like, you can't want to change. The more you want to change, the more you don't accept yourself, the more disgusted you are with yourself. Right? It's kind of really wild, but this energy, so accomplishing this goal, and this is why people get stuck, right? This is why they get stuck, because the more that you do this, the more that you're actually giving into that sense of disgust. You're feeding it, right? It's interesting. So be careful about that. So the question is, okay, like, what do you do about it, right? So do we get over it? No. But are we going to leave it there? Absolutely not. Right? So we can move forward, but we don't want to get over it. This is where we need to accept it. The solution is not getting over, right? Because getting over implies I am bad and I need to transform into I am good. This is good. This is change who I am. This is the goal. Oh, whoop, sorry. Whoa, my God. Sorry about that. Okay, so I want to get over my self-disgust, right? This is coming from disgust. This is the key thing. So the solution is acceptance. And so I am bad, I'm good. This is what you want to accomplish, right? So you want to change who I am. But this over here so this process is a lack of acceptance. Do y'all see that? It's not accepting this at all. In fact, it's doing the exact opposite. It's saying that I'm disgusted with myself. I need to change. I don't want to accept myself at all. Like, this needs to be different. So interestingly enough, and even if we do that, what we're going to be doing, the more that we try to overcome our disgust, the more that we're feeding and giving into our lack of acceptance of ourselves. Okay? So then the question is, how do you accept? What does that look like? So this is where you can say to yourself, you know, I thought of myself as a really good person, yet I've treated women with no respect and ruined all relationships, okay? So that's what this person believes. So what do you say? Well, what you say is like, yeah, so I've made a lot of mistakes, right? I used to think of myself as a good person. I've realized that I've done a lot of bad things. I'm not really sure if I'm a good person or a bad person, and that's okay. I'm working on it, right? So I may have screwed up a lot of things. I may have treated people with disrespect, but today I can do better. I can treat people differently. And it comes down to karma, right? It comes down to actions. I can change the actions that I take. I have no idea on a cosmic sense whether I'm a good person or a bad person. I certainly don't judge that about myself. I don't know who has the capacity to judge whether I'm a good person or a bad person. But so be it. This is like my journey. I'm not perfect. I may even be a bad person. Okay. But today, I can try to do different. I can try to act differently, right? I can like choose to treat women with respect. I can choose to try to be nicer to other people. I can make choices to like not necessarily change the person that I am, but like I can change what I do on a day-to-day basis, even if I'm a bad person. So oddly enough, like that's what acceptance looks like. It's acknowledging, okay, this is okay. It's true. It's fine, right? So be it. Would it be better if things were different? Sure. Absolutely. But it is what it is, right? So maybe I'm not a good person. I used to think of myself as a really good person. Now I'm not so sure. So be it. I'm not going to try to change that. Today, I'm going to just act. I'm going to act in a better way. So even if I'm a bad person, can a bad person do good things? Absolutely. Can a good person do bad things? Absolutely. Right? So it comes down to action. It comes down to like accepting that maybe you have some parts of yourself that are not good. You and everyone else. Right? And if you try to overcome your disgust with yourself, that in and of itself is being fueled by your disgust. So you're just going to feed the problem. And this is exactly why it's so hard to change yourself. Right? Because the way that you change yourself, ironically, is not through trying to change yourself. It's through accepting yourself. That's where change begins. So you see this like in mind-blowing simplicity with like Alcoholics Anonymous. How do you get sober? By admitting you're an alcoholic. Right? You'll start with like, and I'm not 100%, you know, there's a lot of things that I'm not super happy with in terms of AA and how they run. But if you look at it, it's a very effective intervention for a ton of people. I don't agree with 100% of their philosophy. But they got a couple of really important things right. And that's paradoxically, you know, the way that you become sober is by accepting that you're an alcoholic. Right? And they start every single statement. Anytime someone gets up there and speaks, it's, hi, my name is Alok, I'm an alcoholic. And they own it, right? And once you own it, once you're like, you're not saying, I'm no longer an alcoholic, woohoo. No one says that, right? It's a lifelong thing for them. And it's through that power of acceptance that they actually gain the fortitude and strength to gain sobriety. And so in a bizarre way, like own it. Like if you're not a great person, so be it. You don't have to beat yourself up over it. You can accept it and you can change. So this is the other thing about acceptance is a lot of people think that acceptance means giving up. Oh, I screwed up. No, it doesn't mean giving up. In fact, it means the opposite. It means accepting where you are and wanting to move forward. So if I like fail a test, there are two ways I can accept that, right? One is I can accept it and then throw my hands up. And the other way is I failed the test. I need to study harder. Right? So acceptance doesn't mean stopping any kind of forward momentum. In fact, in my life, most of the forward progress I've made is through acceptance of my faults and saying like, I can take action, right? I can take positive karma. I can work on this. So don't get over your disgust. Just accept it. Say there's a part of myself that is really, really disgusted with my actions. That's really interesting. Like that is hurtful, right? Like there's a part of myself that's like very, very upset with me, that loathes who I am. But it doesn't have to be the whole you. It's not the whole you, by the way. Right? You can accept that. You can say, okay, so like I'm going to try to do better. So I don't know if I'm a good person. I don't know if I'm a bad person, but on this particular day, I can take an action that is in the right direction. Last thing to talk about is the time capsule, right? So sometimes when we're in this situation where we're disgusted with ourselves, we just want to retreat from the world, go to a place, enter a cocoon, and come out a fixed human being. And this is where, like I said, it's something that I understand all too well because it's exactly what I did when I first went to India, right? Like, it's like, oh, I'm going to go to this thing, I'm going to transform myself, and then I'm going to come back to the world. Because we view transformation of the self as like separate from the rest of our lives. Whereas the big lesson I learned in India is like, I don't have to be in India to become a monk. In fact, running away to India was just running away from my problems in a subtle way for my ego to like outperform people who were outperforming me. So when someone, when my friends and stuff like got 4.0 GPAs and got into medical school and I failed to get into medical school for the second time in a row, I was like, okay, well, let me go become a monk because then I'm above all of this rat race, all these doctors who are chasing money. I'm better than all of them. I'm not materialistic, et cetera, et cetera. It's all running away from my problems. And then I realized through thankfully a lot of brilliant teachers and some, effort on my own part that I'm going to take my problems with me wherever I go. They're my problems. Running away to India, like, I'm going to take them with me. So you can move to a new town, but like your sense of disgust, well, where is it coming from? Like, where does it live? It lives up here. It's going to come with you, right? So there are absolutely reasons to move for sure. Like that can be very important. Like by all means move. So if your toxicity is coming from your external environment, right? By all means move. Even getting a fresh start, like mentally, can be a good idea. I'm not saying don't move. Just be prepared, right? And I don't think that personal growth can be done. You can work on it like very intentionally, right? You can go to a monastery for a few months. By all means, like go for it. It's a wonderful experience. But like don't assume that just moving somewhere and like working on yourself is like separate from the rest of your life. Like should you dedicate some amount of time to it? Absolutely. But generally speaking, it's going to, your attitude towards yourself is going to come with you. So a lot of times we want to change the person that we are, right? If we think, oh, I used to think I'm a good person. And now I started the journey of introspection and self-reflection, which is fantastic. And as we start to look critically at ourselves, we see a lot of nasty stuff that our mind had been suppressing or ignoring or cognitive biases or whatever. And then as a result, we want to overcome those things, right? We want to transform ourselves into a good person. The unfortunate tricky thing is that oftentimes the self-loathing is what drives the desire to be better. And giving into that self-loathing is actually going to sort of, in a weird way, like propagate the problem. Because I'm going to overcome the disgust that I hold towards myself by giving into the disgust that I hold towards myself, right? And so that's like not a way to fix it. So what's the answer? Acceptance. What the hell does that mean? It means sort of acknowledging for a moment that like it's okay that you screwed up, right? You did screw up. And this, the other thing is we have this idea that if we transform into a good person, then we'll suddenly stop screwing up. That's dangerous. Very dangerous, right? So we see this a lot in terms of people who are like, have accomplished a lot of good things and then get off track. This is like when they, you do a lot of good work and now that I'm a good person, like once you sort of had that identity, you can start making excuses for yourself and getting away with doing bad things. So we don't want to do that, right? Understand that you can't be a good person or a bad person. You're just you. And like whether you have a positive impact on the world or a negative impact on the world has to do with your actions. So how are you going to live today? It's okay that you screwed up in the past. If you treated women with disrespect, I'm not going to say no big deal, but so be it, right? And do better today. Make sense? Questions? Okay, question about the true self. Am I what I experience or am I the thing that experiences? What's the true self there? Say I experience happiness. Am I that happiness or am I the consciousness that experiences that happiness? Excellent question. Kind of a tricky answer. So the first thing that I'd say is that you are that which experiences. So that's the classic conclusion that yogis came to, is that you are the experiencer. and you are not actually any of the experiences. So, when I drink the tea, I am that which tastes the tea. I am not the tea. That being said, there's an interesting caveat, because if you look at dhyan, so there are different states of consciousness, okay? So it's kind of weird. So generally speaking, we're the experiencer. But there are some states of consciousness in which the object of observation and the observer become one. When you become one with the tea, okay? And even when I work with people in like performance stuff, like there's times where if you look at like, if you talk to esports professionals, there are moments where they like transcend human limitations and they become one with the game. And then like you become some sort of bizarre, like you're channeling some sort of like god of the game. And that's when you really reach peak performance. So there's some elements of consciousness, like states of consciousness, right? So this is more like theoretical, esoteric, spiritual stuff. It's not really scientifically, there's some evidence of flow states and stuff like that. So I think we're starting to chip away at that. But what I'm talking about really is not scientifically validated. Flow state is the closest thing that we can get to in terms of science. But where you become one with the object of your doing. So in the flow state is a really good example of scientifically that, right? You become one with the writing. Like you lose yourself and like you are just one with the writing. You're one with like the creation of art. Optimal performance sort of touches on this, which the yogis call sort of like dhyan. But I think those states are actually slightly different. And then there are even some mantras that supposedly if you meditate on, chant, etc., will cultivate oneness with the external thing. So aham brahmasmi is a good example of that, where aham brahmasmi means I am the universe. And so it's kind of weird, like if you just chant that, do you become one with the universe? No, because chanting is on some level intellectual. But when you do mantra practice, there's more than intellectual activity going on. There's a lot of detail about that in Dr. K's guide. So there's theoretically some of these esoteric spiritual practices, like chanting aham brahmasmi, which will bridge the gap between like this person and the external world. And at that point, you may be the happiness. But generally speaking, I tend to think of you as the experiencer as opposed to the experience. Does accepting to be a bad person not reinforce the own view identity to be a bad person? Sort of. So it depends on how you accept it. So that when we're talking about acceptance, you can't accept something from the future, right? Like you can't do that. You can only accept what is in the present and what has happened in the past. So like, just because you accept, so there are two ways to, in a sense, accept things, but I wouldn't even call one of them acceptance. So when your ahamkar, when your past actions form your ahamkar, that goes into the future. That is the determination that I am a bad person. But when we talk about acceptance, we're not talking about, because remember, like that's not who you are. You're neither good nor bad. The true self is neither good nor bad. What you're accepting is that you've made mistakes, right? That's real acceptance. I've screwed up. I'm really not in the best place. I really haven't used my time wisely. And I can change that, right? And going forward, it doesn't have to be that way. These are actions I've taken in the past. These are individual conversations that I've had with women where I have not treated them with respect. In the next conversation that I have with a woman, I have a choice. I can treat them with respect or I can not treat them with respect. And that's the whole problem. That's where and now we'll get to this in a second. Even our next question talks about this. Is that once it becomes an issue of ego, then you're screwed. But if it becomes an issue of action, then you'll find salvation, right? There's a road forward. So when you accept, I wouldn't accept that you're a bad person because I don't think you're a bad person. Even someone who has done bad things doesn't necessarily make them a bad person. I don't believe I have the capacity to judge someone as a bad person or a good person. My mind may do it when I get upset or frustrated or whatever. Like that's a real Karen. We want to do that. Our mind loves to judge other people, but like who made me divine that I can judge another human being? Can I judge their actions? Like absolutely. And this is what I've seen working with people who have addictions. Like there are people out there who've done some really bad stuff who can actually end up being like pretty decent human beings. And it's just about accepting that you have screwed up. and that you can change, right? And once you own that you've screwed up, the interesting thing is it's empowering. Like, it's empowering because that means you're responsible. And if you are responsible, if you accept that responsibility, that also means you have the power to change it.